In a recent UN meeting, they've called on the United States to hit some pretty crazy dietary guidelines. This has a lot of people up in arms. It has people in Congress up in arms. It has industry insiders up in arms. And it has ordinary citizens, as they hear about this, up in arms. That the United Nations is pressing down on the United States, as well as countries like Australia, to cut back significantly on our diets, as well as what's going on out there food-wise and the things that they want to implement. You got to hear all this stuff. It is really, really crazy, and what's happening in response to it in Washington, D.C. Hey everyone, welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade, and we are coming to you from Asia, and where the sun it's nice and bright. I got a little burnt. Sorry about that. Before we dive into this video, we do want to thank our sponsor, Prepper Beef. They have stepped up again here into talking with us because they just have such great products. They are, if you've ever gotten like freeze-dried beef, a lot of times in the cans and stuff like that, it's just like crumbles and stuff like that. But Prepper Beef is actually big, nice big chunks steak, quality product, without all the garbage hormones and all that kind of stuff like that, antibiotics. They don't do any of that. They raise all their own beef with partner ranchers, as well as the fact that it is not ground up into a powder, which makes all the difference. If you want to check out their deals, they have a bunch of sales going on. There's a link down in the pinned comment down below, and there'll be a link at the end of the video. And that definitely does tie into what we're talking about today, because the UN has called on the United States to cut nitrous oxide and methane emissions by half by 2030. Now, that's coming up pretty close right now, 2030, and how they expect us to hit those targets is that they want us to absolutely hit hard the meat industry, especially beef, which is, it doesn't even make sense. What they're saying and what they've constantly been pressuring us to do is more about getting us to conform than it is to actually make any kind of real change. Even the EPA of the United States says that beef cattle only account for about 2% of greenhouse gas emissions. And yet they want us to cut emissions by half, and they want us to do this by just attacking the meat industry, which, you know, I think everyone should have the opportunity to eat whatever they want. If you like tofu and you want to eat tofu, then you should be able to eat tofu. If you want to eat fish, go for it. If you want to eat beef, you should be able to eat beef. And as the fact that we are omnivores, and there are certain parts of our diet that need to come from animal protein. You can supplement. There's some ways that you can kind of get around that, but there's some stuff that's basically only in animal proteins, except for just very, very one or two obscure things in the plant biome that you can get. So if you want to go full vegetarian without ever eating any meat, you're going to actually run into health problems. And this has been shown again and again and again. And yet the UN wants everybody to switch over to being vegetarian. They want, at the very least, have the United States implement some of these things. They want all tax breaks for farmers to effectively to be stopped. Now, all businesses out there get tax breaks. You can write off stuff. What they want us to do is to start treating farmers and ranchers worse than other businesses. They want us to effectively be punishing the farmers who have cattle and are actually running slaughter farms and such like that. So if you have a cattle lot, if you have cattle on your property, basically they want to start not only just taking away tax breaks that you would get as a business, but they want you actually take away basically any kind of tax breaks whatsoever, so the United States is not subsidizing the meat industry at all. And they call it subsidizing, but you know, the fact is that with our tax code, we subsidize basically everything, right? And when you start taking away those tax incentives for people to do business, you actually are essentially punishing them. Not only that, but they want to limit meat consumption inside the United States by having the United States impose a vice tax on meat. So just as you have to pay taxes on cigarettes or alcohol, because those are considered a vice, very politically convenient to go after tax-wise after these things that are vices, because like nobody, not too many people really stand up and say, no, we really shouldn't do that, because it's like, well, we want to curb this habit anyway, and so we're going to do that by imposing a bunch of taxes. And then we're going to say, well, however much people buy now is, and then we put that tax on there, we'll just project that that's how much money we're going to raise, which is never how it works. You start creating a black market. People do actually get incentivized to stop using those items. But what they want to do is they want to incentivize people to stop eating meat by simply putting a vice tax on meat. How would you like that? That you get your beef price for your steak, and then they add another 10% tax on it or something like that, in order to punish you for not going along with the green agenda of the United Nations. So we have 2% of the greenhouse emissions of the United States coming from beef cattle, and this is what they want to go after. They want to go after manipulating what you eat. And we really see this is so much more about control. Just as the coverings and everything like that was more about control, social control, than it was about actually helping anybody do anything. They wanted everyone to turn into autonomous robots. That's why we had all these pictures that came out of events where the celebrities were all without coverings, and then all the serving staff had to wear coverings. It's like, how does that make sense? If that's really for people's health, then everyone should be wearing them. But no, that wasn't what it was about. It was about showing people who are important people and who are unimportant people. Politicians without coverings, and workers, serving staff with coverings. It's like to show you who is an NPC, as they say, non-player character, and who are the actual real people. And mark my words, the reason why they're doing that is dehumanizing people makes it easier to not only control them, but then also to see them as less than what you are. And you can then legitimize it morally in your own mind, that these people aren't really that important. They're not real people. And so we can manipulate them. We can do whatever we want to them. And we can eat our steak up in our mansions and laugh at the little people who can't afford to do that because we think it's funny. We can get out on our yachts and we can sail around the oceans, just churning up oil, spouting off all pollutants and everything like that, hop in our private jets and cart around the world, while we're laughing at ordinary Americans whose lives are being endangered by fuel-efficient vehicles. Fuel-efficient vehicles where they remove safety features in order to make them more fuel efficient. And this is where we are today, is that our lives are truly being endangered. Our lives are being meddled with from the United Nations and the people in Washington, D.C. that are going along with this madness. Half of all U.S. emissions come from the richest 10% of Americans. 10% of American households produce 50% of U.S. emissions. Are we going to go after those people? Are we going to go after the Congress people who like their ice cream? Are we going to go after the president that likes his ice cream? The president who has what, like 5 mansions? How many mansions does a person need? Well, if you want to have your summer home, if you want to have your winter home, if you want to have your, how many mansions do you need? How many houses, and you look at these houses, they're not small houses, they're mansions. Each of them with staff. How does a guy who has been serving in Congress for like, what, $200-some thousand a year for the past like 40 or 50 years, how does he afford mansions like this? He's a really good investor, apparently. And also he's got family members that keep giving him a whole bunch of money. And where do those family members, those family members who really love Coca-Cola, and, they may be deadbeats, but somehow they get their hands on tens of millions of dollars and pass along some of that to the big guy. And all in all, what we're seeing here is just this absolute rampant, out of control, we call them an elite. You know, the academics, the politicians, the wealthy of the wealthy out there, the ones that inherited their money, the ones that steal their money, the ones that aren't actually building profitable things. A lot of people will knock Elon Musk, but let's just say it this way. He earned his money by writing the code for and building up the business of PayPal and then selling that and then not retiring, but rather buying up a large portion of Tesla Motors and actually reforming that company into the powerhouse that it is. I mean, I would never buy one because of all the issues that go on with electric vehicles and stuff like that. I'm not wealthy enough to have 2 or 3 cars, and one of them being a super expensive electric car. And then him buying into SpaceX and reforming that into being just an absolute technological marvel to the world. He is absolutely insanely rich, but let's just say it this way, he built that. He really did truly build that wealth. He provided massive value to a lot of people. And then you look at Jeff Bezos with Amazon. Now, with all the anti-competitive practices and all that kind of stuff. But let's just say it this way, there is nothing more convenient than getting something on Amazon and getting it the next day or a couple days later. It's super convenient. And the fact is that he has built an infrastructure that in a company that actually provides services and touches the lives of ordinary Americans every single day. And so you gotta hand it to them. But then you have other people like the George Soroses. You have the inherently wealthy people who have institutional wealth that was passed down generation to generation. They're part of the good old boys club. They're at the Ivy League, and they get jobs because they know the right people. And they are all about ruining the United States as it is, not to make it more competitive, not to make us better people, or to provide services to Americans, but rather to control, to tell us what we can eat, what we can't eat, what we can drive and what we can't drive, and to constantly meddle in our lives, not to provide us goods and services that we can voluntarily engage with, but rather with regulations and rules that mess and meddle with our lives in ways that we don't want, that none of us signed up for. We don't want these taxes. We don't want this social engineering that they're doing in our lives, and yet that's exactly what we're getting. And the United Nations is pressing this not on developing countries, not on China, not on India. Well, India doesn't really eat beef, right? But India has more cows than and beef cattle than most countries combined because they don't eat them, but they do milk them and they do worship them. So that's a whole other thing. But when are we going to tell them that they need to cut down on their cattle herd, right? No one's going to say that to them, right? But it's not the developing countries, but rather the first world countries, the United States, the Australia, even they don't even want to go after the Europeans. They don't want to go after the Europeans because they get pushback on that, right? Because Europeans tend to be part of the good old boys club as well, right? It's really the nasty Americans, the terrible Americans. Let's get our good old boys over there to really just throttle the Americans and punish them. They know Australia will go along with it because Australia it just takes basically anything that is thrown at them. When it comes to what's going on with the weather, the Australians will do whatever they're told to do by the UN because, I don't know, they're just like that. And I know there's a lot of people in Australia that are not like that, but by and large, the city folk in Australia are so hyper liberal that they will do anything that the UN asks them to do. If the UN tells them to start eating bugs tomorrow, they're gonna say how many, right? And so the United States our cattle herd is at a 73-year low. And the United Nations is like, that's not enough. You need to cut your cattle herd by, at least half. But they want us to hit actually nitrous oxide and methane emission guidelines, which is just absolutely insane. Do you know how much methane just seeps out of the earth into the atmosphere from, it's basically natural gas is methane, right? Natural gas leaking out not of just fractures in the ground. Methane emissions, they don't want to count those methane emissions because those are planetary emissions, and we only want to look at human-produced emissions. Of course, how is cattle human emissions? You're going to have to go ask some UN dweeb about that. All right, friends, thanks so much for watching. If you want to find out more about Prepper Beef and you want to look at some of the deals that they have 15% off right now. There's a link right there that you can click on, or you can find it down in the pinned comment. Also, if you want to check out another video from the channel, there's one right up there. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.